Welcome to Upstairs at the Square. We are assembled for this show tonight, this edition, here in the flagship Barnes & Noble in Manhattan's Union Square. Go ahead, say hello, everybody. I'm your host, Catherine Lanfer. And tonight we have singer-songwriter Regina Spektor and journalist and novelist Kurt Anderson. Now, as I said, he's a journalist and a historical novelist who sees opportunity in our current economic crisis. She's known for unspooling modern-day dilemmas in brilliantly packaged pop tunes. His newest book is called Reset. Her latest album is called Far. And we're going to start out tonight's show with a song from Far. Regina?
Thank you. No laughs are God in a hospital. No laughs are God in a war. No one's laughing at God when they're starving or freezing or so very poor. No laughs at God when a doctor calls after some routine tests. No one's laughing at God when it's gotten real late and their kid's not back from that party yet. No one laughs at God when their airplane starts to uncontrollably shake. No one's laughing at God when they see the one they love hand in hand with someone else and they hope that they're mistaken. No one laughs at God when the cops knock on your door and they say, "We got some bad news, sir." No one's laughing at God when there's a famine, fire, or flood. But God could be funny at a cocktail party while listening to a good God-themed joke, or when the crazy say he hates us and they get so red in the head you think they're about to choke. God could be funny when told to give you money if you just pray the right way, and when presented like a genie who does magic like Houdini or grants wishes like Jiminy Cricket and Santa Claus. God could be so hilarious, ha ha. No one laughs at God in a war. No one's laughing at God when they've lost all they got and they don't know what for. No one laughs at God on a day they realize that the last sight they'll ever see is a pair of hateful eyes. No one's laughing at God when they're saying their goodbyes. But God could be funny at a cocktail party while listening to a good God-themed joke, or when the crazy say he hates us and they get so red in the head you think they're about to choke. God could be funny when told he'll give you money if you just pray the right way, and when presented like a genie who does magic like Houdini or grants wishes like Jiminy Cricket and Santa Claus. God could be so hilarious, but no one laughs at God in a hospital. No one laughs at God in a war. No one laughs at God in a hospital. No one laughs at God in a war. No one laughing at God in a hospital. No one's laughing at God in a war. No one's laughing at God when they're starving or freezing or so very poor. No one's laughing at God. No one's laughing at God. No one's laughing at God. We're all laughing with God. Thank you.
That, of of course, that's Regina Spektor singing Laughing With. That's from her latest album, Far. And by the way, that is Kei Ishibashi on the violin and Daniel Cho on cello. And dare I need to add it, this is our Kurt Anderson.
Yeah.
Hello, Catherine.
You get greeted like that every day, right?
Hello, Regina.
Hi, Kurt.
Hey, Regina, I read once that since you arrived in this country in 1989 at the age of 9, that you like to joke that your version of the 80s was held in the 90s.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, all the fun, like, shoulder pads and the big hair and all the music, I didn't get to have that till, like, mid to late 90s, So I was just kind of a decade late with it. But
Hey, now, Kurt, in Reset, you argue that, in fact, the 80s stayed around way too long.
I say that the 80s really didn't end until last fall, and thank God they finally did. No, to me, I just kept waiting for that decade to end, and it kept going through the 90s and kept going through the aughts.
But what do you mean that the 80s stayed around? Because, Regina's talking about shoulder pads. I don't think you are.
No, I'm not talking about shoulder pads, although if you look at how people dressed 20 years ago, it's shockingly the way they look and dress today. No, but I'm talking about sort of the idea that we can clap our hands and believe in fairies and somehow we'll just get rich, and that the rich get richer, and that's groovy. That's the 80s, and I'm hopeful that we've sort of reality checked ourselves into a better way of thinking.
So where exactly is the opportunity in this crisis?
To get sane, to get sensible, to realize that, spending money crazily doesn't necessarily get you happiness, and that our grandparents' version of life wasn't so bad, and to rethink the way we do politics, the way we do healthcare, the way we do energy, all of it, as ugly as it is to watch day by day in Washington. It's a huge opportunity to when the table is tipped over, to put it up right and to set it up in new ways.
Regina, given that you came here, as I mentioned earlier, at the age of 9 from the Soviet Union, I'm wondering if you see the same sense of opportunity when you look at our present situation?
yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I know that it's caused tremendous amounts of pain for people, and I know that it's brought in a lot of very bad things, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't excited when this whole thing happened, because I sort of thought that it was going to make people really look at why they need money, what they're looking for in their lives, how they're going to make themselves happy if it's not, the extra bedroom in their house renovated for the 5th time or whatever, I thought I was sort of, I was definitely thinking more of the fun 80s and not the economic 80s. I'm glad for that to end as well. I think that, the exciting thing about America to me was, was sort of always the romantic immigrants' notion of America, where people come and they really follow their dreams, and their dreams are not just to earn a whole pile of money and sit on it, And so hopefully people's dreams are going to start changing with, when they're going to realize that they're not just going to be able to, follow these 4 steps and make a lot of money, and that's all they really want out of life.
Well, and, it's also about where talent is rewarded. I mean, that somebody like Regina Spektor gets to be famous instead of any number of undeserving people we could mention who get to be famous.
Who were you thinking of?
Oh, I'll talk to me later.
All right. Hey, let's hear from your book. Let's hear from Reset.
Okay. Thank you. This is a chapter called The Reckoning. It was the attacks of 9/11 that we supposed at the time had changed everything. Except for national security, however, American life returned to normal. After that alarm went off, we punched the snooze button and drifted back to sleep. dreaming of easy money and flat-screen TVs. But now we're fully awake and everything really has changed. Here we are, going on 2 years into the Great Recession, with the bottom only just barely in sight, and almost a year after the financial system began imploding, it's still looking iffy. The party is finally definitely over. And the present decade, which we've never even agreed what to call, the 2000s, the aughts, has now acquired its permanent character as a historical pivot defined by the nightmares of 9/11 and the panic of 2008, 2009. All of us, and certainly those of us old enough to remember life before our 26-year-long spree began, will be spending the rest of our lives dealing with the consequences in economics, in foreign policy, culture, politics, the warp and woof of our daily lives. During the 1980s and 1990s, we were Wile E. Coyote, racing heedlessly across the endless American landscape at maximum speed. And then we spent the beginning of this 21st century suspended in midair, just past the end of the cliff. Finally, last year, gravity reasserted itself and we plummeted. Now, in the Roadrunner cartoons, after each hapless crack-up, the coyote always survives, and America isn't about to expire either. But unlike Wile E. Coyote, who simply keeps careening and smashing into the same spectacular dead ends, we can learn from our mistakes. Now, enthusiasts for unfettered American-style capitalism have for years blithely reminded us that the withering away of businesses and whole industries is a healthy and necessary part of a vibrant, self-correcting economic system. Fair enough. Creative destruction. But now, finally, we're obliged to endure the shocking and awesome pain of that creative destruction. After decades of talking the talk, now we've all got to walk the walk. We can't just hunker down, cross our fingers, hysterically pinch our pennies, wait for the crisis to pass, and expect to go back to business as usual. All that conventional political wisdom about 2008 being a change year, we had no idea. Recently, Rush Limbaugh appeared on Sean Hannity's Fox News show, panicking not so much about our economic straits as about how the political winds are blowing as a result. If we now, at long last, manage to achieve something like universal health care, Limbaugh warned, it would mean, quote, the end of America as we know it. He's right, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. This is the end of the world as we've known it, but it isn't the end of the world.
Kurt Anderson, reading from Reset. So, New World is a funny phrase for this country. I mean, 100 years ago, we were a new world. More than 200 years ago, we were an experiment. So how can that background help us now?
It's a very good point. I think, 150 years ago, say, back in the 19th century, we were like adolescents. We were just coming into our own, full of energy, full of that experimental idea. And frankly, the country is now more like, say, middle-aged. And but imagining that it's a teenager that can still, shake it up baby. And
that is such an ugly image.
Well, and I mean it to be. I think, there's a lot of life left in America and the American idea, but not if we, just keep driving into the ditch and thinking that there are no consequences to choices that we make as individuals and as a country.
Well, and in fact, you suggest that as a country, we should go into recovery, as it were.
A little bit. I think, well, at least the whole rehab vocabulary, the recovery vocabulary of the last 25 years that we've all become familiar with, the 12 steps or whatever they are in their various forms, I looked at how we've behaved in the last 10, 20 years, basically being addicted to cheap credit and cheap money and cheap gasoline. We are addicted. Unlike people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol, I
love the woot for alcohol.
It's more like we're more like sex addicts or food addicts, which is to say we can't stop cold turkey. We've still got to keep eating and having sex and spending. More to the point, we are economic beings. So the trick is really just admitting that we were powerless over our love all these unsustainable choices.
You know, you've got all the journalist credentials, and for anyone here who doesn't know, he's the host of Public Radio Studio 360. This book started out as an essay for Time magazine, where he got his start as a writer. He was the founder of Spy magazine. He's the former editor of New York magazine. Now, despite this long and beautiful resume of yours, I suspect it was your novels, Turn of the Century, and then your most recent novel, Heyday, which looks at pre-Civil War America. What did those novels give you in terms of looking at America in 2009?
Well, and first of all, to the point of reset, the reason I finally had the courage to start writing novels 13 years ago was because I got fired from my job as editor of New York Magazine, and, you know, you figure out something else to do and start over. Resetting is possible. Change is possible. Anyhow, as I spent years down the, to me, fascinating rabbit hole of the 19th century doing research, where I could have, if my family hadn't pulled me back, stayed for more years.
Oh my God, he bought a stovepipe hat. Stop him. Get a doctor.
You don't know.
Yeah.
But I spent a lot of time in my head in the 19th century, and I saw that these kinds of bubbles and panics and bubbles and panics. Yes? Keep going?
Just keep going, yep.
These bubbles and panics are what America has always been. We are this kind of bipolar people. You know, we're wild and crazy, and then we get very sober and serious, and then we get wild and crazy and get and spend, and then we say, no, we better take care of the poor people and fix the systems that got us into so much trouble. And so it made me hopeful to see that, you know, we've been here before and we've gotten out of it, but not just by the act of being Americans. We have this moment where we can make certain choices about how we want to live and how we want our, you know, governmental systems to be, and it's a brief moment. It always is.
You know, I love how in a novel you create an entire world, and to me, Regina, you do that with your songs, like within 3 minutes.
With a lot less attention span, a lot less hard effort and research.
Well, on the other hand, 3 minutes to create a world, that's something. You know, a little later we're going to hear a song called Blue Lips. And I was wondering if when you enter into those worlds, do they like knock and announce themselves?
This is my moment, like the way you had about your book.
Well, let me ask you this: if you were going to envision a new world, what would it be?
Oh, well, it would be a lot less cruel than this one. It would be a lot less immediate gratification than this one. I think that's one of our, I think that really is one of our great sort of downfalls as America today, is that immediate gratification thing that wasn't always present. And and actually in your book, when, you know, in Heyday, you have that whole, you know, the moment of history when the gold rush happened, and that sort of immediate gratification, like people going from this world where they know they have to work really hard, and maybe it's good to work hard, and it's good to plan ahead and have, you know, the fruits of your labor and all that, to this moment of instant.com, instant Wall Street, instant gambling, and that's sort of the new world I would have. I don't know what it would be like, but it would be less about instant gratification, more about the long run.
I'm going to link the worlds that you guys do. I would love to hear an excerpt from Heyday, and then we'll go into a song right away from you, Regina. So let's set up this excerpt from Heyday.
Heyday begins in 1848, and this section that I'm going to read is you're with a guy named Timothy Skaggs. He's a 35-year-old writer and lately photographer in New York City. He has spent his day writing and now has put a few grains of opium in his tea and headed out for a walk down Broadway. March 18th, 1848. Skaggs had walked quite far, he realized now, in this pleasantly addled state. And that was part of the problem with his current life, he reckoned. His familiarity with almost every board and stone and step of Manhattan. his habitat by now so well known that even in an opium haze, he was able to wander for a mile in a trance, chatting silently with himself. As he crossed Worth Street, he watched the lamplighter gingerly poke his torch like a wizard's wand up inside the glass globe toward the jet of gas. The bloom of light surged and enveloped Skaggs. A moment earlier, it had been late afternoon, the sky still indigo. Now, from within the glamorous bubble of white-hot golden glow, it seemed as if night had fallen over the rest of the city. Skaggs's favorite hours in New York had always been the gradual liminal recession of day into night, that daily autumn, with each of its soft, slow, ambiguous gradations of deepening color and shadow. But twilight had been rendered obsolete by the New York Gas Light Company. Half the city's street lamps were gas now. Skaggs did not believe, as many people did, that gaslight harmed one's eyes. But expanding its territory in every direction, the new light allowed New York, forced it really, to remain awake longer, to ignore the Earth's rotations. The interminable glow had turned tens of thousands of New Yorkers into night-crawling scamps, instead of the select fraternity that stayed out late carousing when Skaggs had first arrived. Back then, a city inspector had patrolled every gassed street every evening, and by midnight would pound his cane on the sidewalk and yell, "Lights out!" Now the lights burned practically all night long. And Skaggs did wonder if the city's gas-fired wakefulness had begun to overstimulate its inhabitants, make them merrier, louder, funnier, stranger, greedier, crazed. As he stepped now from the luminous Worth Street blossom back into the ordinary mid-block evening, the whole view down Broadway struck him as unusually bright, saturated with light. To be modern, he thought, is to be artificially aglow. Nor was the new luminosity only a matter of gaslight spreading into every parlor and every respectable street. There were also the laughably huge new panes of plate glass that amounted to architectural magician's tricks, erasing the boundaries between indoors and out. And those unearthly rays of light beaming from burning lime that transformed any actor on a stage into a shining angelic or demonic figure. The magic lantern shows of Jesus on the cross and Halley's Comet scaring a tribe of Indians. The new, exceptionally yellow paints and bright red printer's inks, all mixed up by chemists in laboratories. The telegraph wires that sparked and blushed against the night skies like grapevines beset by St. Elmo's fire. Modernity glows.
He stumbled into faith and thought, God, this is all there is. The pictures in his mind arose and began to breathe, and all the gods and all the worlds began colliding on a backdrop of blue lips, blue veins. He took a step but then felt tired. He said, I'll rest a little while. But when he tried to walk again, he wasn't a child. And all the people hurried past real fast, and no one ever smiled. Blue lips, blue veins, blue, the color of our planet from far, far away. Blue lips, blue veins, blue, the color of our planet from far, far away. He stumbled into faith and thought, God, this is all there is. The pictures in his mind arose and began to breathe, and no one saw, no one heard. They just followed voices in his mind awoke and began to breed. They started off beneath the knowledge tree, and then they chopped it down to make what picket fences, and they're marching along the railroad tracks. They smiled real wide for the camera lenses. They made it past the enemy lines just to become enslaved in the assembly lines. Blue, the color of our planet from far, far away. Blue lips, blue veins, blue, the color of our planet from far, far away. Blue, the most human color. Blue, the most human color. Blue, the most human color. Blue lips, blue veins, blue, the color of our planet from far, far away.
That was Kurt Anderson reading from his novel Heyday, and Regina Spektor doing Blue Lips from her album Far. And I want to remind you again, Kei Ishibashi on the violin and Daniel Cho on cello. When you were a kid growing up in the Soviet Union and your parents said to you, someday we're going to go to America, what vision did you have of this country?
I pictured it like a safari. I thought that everybody in America had, for some reason, America in my head was like a Jungle Book, and everybody had pet panthers and parrots that talked to them and lions, and I don't know.
Back in the 70s, we did, yeah.
What a disappointment when you finally got here. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's sort of the built-in padding of a 9-year-old is that you hit the ground running and you're like, oh, cool, no panthers. All right, what's up? You know.
And when you got here, you didn't have enough English to communicate right away.
I didn't have any.
I don't know why I was hedging. I was fudging, really. But you drew pictures.
Yeah, like but very, very basic, crude animations of, let's say I was feeling sick at school, I would draw a thermometer in black pen, and then I would take a red marker and I would go all the way up and, show like it's going off the map, and then, I'd be like, and they would take me to the nurse.
I'm wondering, though, how you think the acquisition of another language has an impact on you as a storyteller.
Well, I think that, language is sort of the lifeblood of every nation, and if you want to understand the people, you understand their language, and you read books in that language, and you will really know their soul. I think that. So, I think just all the expressions and all the things of the Russian books and sort of the Russian language definitely helped me have this whole other world, other than, the English. But also I think you sort of because I experienced it at a very young age, going sort of from Russia, then to Austria, then to, Italy, then to America. And so all of a sudden, I sort of had this thing of, well, everything is just sounds, and everybody it's very, it's very abstract and sort of arbitrary, really. Like, these people pick this sound, these people pick this sound. So in a lot of ways, it's, as much as it's the lifeblood, it's also like a paradox, because it's also an illusion. Like, you're just kind of born into it, but, it's just sounds. And so, I don't know, maybe it just made me kind of think, well, I don't know. I guess any sounds are allowed, and kind of any kind of expression is allowed. So maybe, I don't know if I answered your question, Catherine.
You did a beautiful job. So I know that you grew up thinking and training to be a classical concert pianist. What moment, was there a moment that happened when you said, not going to happen?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of moments, but I think it's sort of actually I think that people grow up and they forget how hard it is to be a teenager and how you're sort of, everybody's sort of talking to you like you're an adult, and everybody wants you to answer what you're going to do with your life. And if the answer you've been saying since you were 6, all of a sudden somewhere inside your heart changes, you have to then deal with the pain of every time somebody says, so what are you going to be when you grow up? And you've said classical pianist for, as long as you can remember, and you don't feel that anymore. That's really, really hard. So I don't think there was like a day or a moment, but it was just this creeping, like, horror of realization where I'm not good enough to do this, and it just was like coming at me from, but, luckily at the right moment, some friends handed me some Western music I'd never heard before. I never really heard women singing, really. I mean, as stupid as that sounds, until I got some mixtapes of like Joni Mitchell and Ani DeFranco when I was 15, and all of a sudden I was like, well, maybe, maybe I could putz around and try this, and then, I really tried, but, I think that it's sort of, there's a lot of obvious things in our world that sometimes you just can't see. They're right in front of you, and you won't know that you can do it unless you see other people doing it.
Well, I think there's also something about the liberation that can come with failure, and I wish I had made up that line, but someone else did. And you've already sort of alluded to it tonight, but talk about that for a minute.
Well, I mean, and it's almost a universal idea. I mean, people say they've learned their best lessons from failure, or from if not failure, at least setback and trauma. I mean, Steve Jobs, for instance, starts Apple Computer. 10 years later, he gets booted out by his own firm, and says at the time, after he goes on to create Pixar and take over Apple again, he says it was the best, as it turns out, it was the best time of his life because he didn't have this heavy pressure of feeling successful. It was traumatic, but he was forced to start over again, And I think, not, as Regina said, not to minimize real pain that people feel, but, what you get knocked off the horse, whatever the horse is, you don't have to get back on that horse. You can figure out a different horse to ride, and out of those setbacks and failures, you can figure out, well, what was I doing wrong there? Why did that happen? And maybe I didn't even really want to be doing that. Maybe I don't want to be a classical pianist. I'll be a non-classical pianist, or I'll be a novelist instead of a magazine editor. Life is scary, but it doesn't need to do you in when you have those setbacks.
I was wondering if going from classical, this is for both of you really, but to go from classical music to writing pop songs, to go from journalism to writing, is that like learning another language?
You go first, Kurt.
A bit. It is learning, not so much another language as another way of thinking that in writing, for me anyway, writing nonfiction and doing journalism, is you're always trying to adhere to certain facts as opposed to, as you say, making up worlds.
But I was just going to say, but here's what's interesting to me. Classical music, there's a form you have to follow. You can infuse it with passion. Journalism, you're not supposed to make stuff up.
It's true.
So all of a sudden, you both get to make stuff up.
Right.
How scary is that?
For me, it was completely giddy and wonderful for the first 6 months and then it's like, wait a minute, I've climbed this halfway up this mountain and I don't know how to get the rest of the way. Holy cow, so it's terrifying.
Well, I think that it's, I think that at first it's true, like the excitement of the new thing is just, and then all of a sudden you realize that you're so far from, like for me, I went from being, not a very great classical pianist, but I'd worked at this, and I knew what music was supposed to sound like, at least in my head, and then I was trying to sing and play at the same time, and I was playing these very crude, very, very bad things, and so you go from playing amazing music like Chopin and Mozart to playing your own crap. It's like very unpleasant, you know, and then you think, well, does anybody need any, you know, and why should I even be making music when there's so many, you know, great works out there already, and then you have to get past that and sort of try and find just for me it was just my own pleasure. I was like, whatever, I'm gonna suck, but I love, you know, I feel compelled to write, so I'm gonna write and try and find a way with it, you know. But
You've said that writing songs is a mixture of euphoria and fear.
Well,
where's the fear come in?
I think that actually when I write songs, I don't feel fear. I don't know, sometimes I just get on the spot, like, and I try to answer something, and
it sounded great.
but
I was completely taken in. I was like, wow, fear. I got to ask her about that.
It sounds really poetic. I said that? No, I think that the fear definitely comes, like, I get, you know, scared, like, sitting,
don't
like playing,
don't look up there.
Right before playing, I'm like, you know, very scared person. But, and, you know, I know you're not all, you don't look very dangerous or anything, but but I do feel the panic. But I think that actually, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, maybe, you know, actually there is something to the fear, because the only fear that I do feel sometimes, it's kind of, I know, a non-horrible way of explaining this, but like the moment when you realize that you're writing something and you've in euphoric state or whatever, then you get scared that now you're not going to be able to finish, or you're going to spook it, or you're going to lose that moment, and then you're going to be stuck just trying to finish something with like no, you know, help. I don't know how to.
Well, and in my case, having been a critic and a journalist, then when you start writing fiction, there's a voice in the back of my head that after each seemingly decent sentence or paragraph, I can write the withering, vicious critique of what I've just written. So, yeah, it's a little bit of schizophrenia.
I was just going to say, wow, critique for each sentence?
Well, maybe not each sentence, but certainly like each day's work.
Well, I wondered, though, how does one get the righteous presumption to decide that you can tell the country if this is a good moment or a bad moment?
You know, you stick around long enough and people allow you to presume. Pretty much that. You know, until somebody tells me to go away and stop and never write again, I'll keep trying.
Where does that optimism come from?
Well, my optimism is not full bore. It's not 100%. It's like 51%. It's like I see the glass just barely half full. I see tragedy around the corner and decline. I know this is off message of my book, but
I was going to say, dude, I read it.
I know, but I don't want to give people who haven't read it the idea that it's just all pansies and unicorns. You know, I don't know. I guess I have my parents to blame for a certain amount of normal Midwestern hopefulness.
I detect the same sense of optimism in your work as well, Regina. And I wondered, I mean, you guys both should know better.
She has good parents, too.
Yeah, I do. And they're both optimists, with a healthy dose, though, of the tragedy might be just around the corner. Like, there might be a, you know, pack your bags, get out moment, as we had, but...
You know, you mentioned your parents. Could you talk about their place in your work for a moment?
Oh, I mean, it's giant. I mean, I can't even... It's almost like I can't even imagine that I would be doing really anything if I hadn't had them, they hadn't been the way they are. I mean, I think that basically, I think that good parents in our world are responsible for everything good that's ever happened in our world, and bad parents are responsible for everything bad that's ever happened in our world. That's how important parents are, I think. Yeah.
And another story that I read about that I was dying to hear, someone else had to tell you that you could be a singer?
You have such shock. Well, yeah, and actually, this might sound really... Okay, my parents are really good, even though they told me that I was not a good singer.
Hey, everyone gets one mistake, right? You're a parent, Kurt, you know that.
Yes, but I tell my children they're good singers, so what can I say?
And are they?
They're in the audience, so
Yeah. I was going to say, Regina, work with
Yes,
me. They're
great
right
one.
here.
No, they, you know what it was is just, I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that, well, first of all, I wasn't. And I really think that the people that said that to me in the beginning, like, thank God it was those people I bumped into, not the other ones. They would have been, keep your mouth closed, don't ever do that again. But it's just that I was the kind of singer that I loved singing, but I was never trained, so I would just, you know, we didn't have a very big apartment, and they'd have to listen to 2 hours of me just yelling at the top of my lungs. You know, I understand why they were like, maybe you shouldn't sing. You know? Go practice piano.
I would love to also have both of you talk about the place of New York in both your life and in your work. It's another point of connection that I see for both of you. Hard to imagine either of your careers really without New York in it in some fashion.
Thank you. I just came here like a lemming when I got out of college. I grew up in the Midwest and just said, bye, New York. And didn't have a job, and it all worked out okay. And not long after I arrived here, I read this great little book. We're in a bookstore. I can mention a book by E.B. White about New York. It's this tiny little wonderful book. And he says in it that New York consists of this kind of person, and the third kind of person are the people who come from elsewhere and come to New York. And those people, in order to move to New York, have to be willing to be lucky. It just struck me as the greatest sort of Zen-like celebration of New York City that I'd ever encountered, and decided, willing to be lucky. I'm not sure what that means, but let me go there. And no, I have been in love with New York, and both of my novels so far, and especially this one, are deep with the stink and the glow of the city.
Turn of the Century, your first novel, takes place at the turn of the last century.
Yes.
So 1999 to 2000.
Correct.
Heyday takes place in 1848, 1849. Which New York did you like better?
Oh, well, time travel is my great abiding fantasy, so, I don't know if I liked it better, but I'd give literally either arm to be able to time travel. And so being able to fake it as reasonably well for a few years in my mind, I enjoyed being in the middle of the 19th century.
See, to me, in a Regina Spektor song, that would happen. You'd give up the arm. Which one?
Well, I'm left-handed, so I'll go my right arm, as the cliche goes.
Okay, all right.
And I read that in what you said, that part on the subway in the poetry in motion thing, and I never read the book, but I liked that.
E.B.
And
White's?
I remember, yes. And so now I know where it comes from. But
we're happy to serve.
Thank you.
So the place of New York in your work and in your life, because you were not only an immigrant to this country, but you came here.
Well, I think that, to me, New York is it's like a separate planet within the planet, and so it's just because it's so international, and it's so, I don't know, it's so magical. Like you could walk one block, you have the most modern, crazy building, and hear like 5 different languages. Another block, there's some historic thing that looks like it's, out of some little corner of Paris, and it has so much, it does have all the stink in it and everything, and I love it, but very much. But I love, to me, it's very real, and it's a city where if you walk out of your door, you're going to see real good in people, you're going to see real bad in people, you're going to see anger, you're going to see people being, really kind, and you're just going to experience a lot of emotion. Like, there's no way that you're going to just walk out and have a really even-keel day and not feel anything, and not notice some heartbreaking thing or some beautiful thing. And so it's very much like you are engaged in your life if you're living in New York, because it's going to force you, So I love that, and I think, if you're writing, or and your world is stories and characters and people and things, then it's just the place to be, really.
So let's hear some more of your music.
Spilled, of course, water on myself. As I was supposed to play.
Come and open up your folding chair next to me. My feet are buried in the sand, and there's a breeze. There's a shadow, I can't see my eyes. And the sea is just a wetter version of the skies. Let's get us a bullet trailer and have a baby boy. I'll safety pin his clothes all cool, and you'll graffiti up his ties. I've got a perfect body, but sometimes I forget I got a perfect body, 'cause my eyelashes catch my sweat. Yes, they do, they do. Now I've been sitting on this abandoned beach for years, waiting for the salty water to cover up my ears. But every time the tide come in to take me home, I get scared. Now I'm sitting here alone, dreaming of the dolphin song. Maybe one day you will understand I don't want nothing from you but just really hold your hand. Till that day, just please don't be so down. Don't make frowns, you silly clown. Just come and open up your folding chair next to me. My feet are buried in the sand, and there's a breeze. There's a shadow, you can't see my eyes. And the sea is just a wetter version of the skies. There's a shadow, you can't see my eyes. There's a shadow, you can't see my eyes.
An optimistic song to wrap up an hour, or a little bit less, with two optimists. Before we move on to our last and final song, I would like to acknowledge our musicians again. Kei Ishibashi on the violin, Daniel Cho on cello. And Kurt Anderson, author of Reset, Heyday, Turn of the Century. Thank you so much. And Miss Regina Spektor. Thank you. The album, of course, the new album is Far, but we're going to end our show tonight with an old favorite from Soviet Kitsch.
They made a statue of us and put it on a mountaintop. Now tourists come and stare at us, blow bubbles with their gum, take photographs, have fun, have fun. They'll name a city after us and later say it's all our fault. Then they'll give us a talking to, then they'll give us a talking to, 'cause they've got years of experience living in a den of thieves, rummaging for answers in the pages, living in a den of thieves, and it's contagious, and it's contagious, and it's contagious, and it's contagious. We wear our scarves just like a noose, but not 'cause we want eternal sleep. And though our parts are slightly used, new ones are slave labor you can keep. A den of thieves, rummaging for answers in the pages, a den of thieves, and it's contagious, and it's contagious, and it's contagious, and it's contagious. They made a statue of us, they made a statue of us. The tourists come and stare at us, the sculptors mama sends regards. They made a statue of us, they made a statue of us. Our noses have begun